Imagine you come to watch a normal football match, but just a few days later, two countries will start a real war. This is exactly what happened in 1969. It sounds crazy. How could a football match lead to a war? It all happened between two neighboring countries, Honduras and El Salvador. And the problem wasn't football at all. The real reason was much deeper. Earth, poverty, and years of mutual hatred. Thousands of families were forced to leave their homes. Every day the tension grew stronger. People started blaming each other. The newspapers added fuel to the fire every day. The headlines got louder, and the people got angrier. It seemed that all it took was one spark for everything to catch fire. And then the day came, when the two teams met in a World Cup qualifying match. For millions of people, it was no longer just about football. It was about the honor of their country. And no one understood at the time that this match would go down in world history forever. The first match was held in the capital of Honduras. The day before the game, thousands of fans took to the streets. The city barely slept all night. When the Salvadoran team arrived at the hotel, it was a nightmare. The fans surrounded the building and started making noise all night. They didn't let the football players sleep for a moment. The next morning, the Salvadoran players took the field with little sleep. Every kick of the ball caused an explosion of emotions in the stands. It seemed that the entire stadium was about to erupt. The match was incredibly tense. No one wanted to give in. And only at the very end, the home team scored the decisive goal. The stadium literally exploded with joy. But for El Salvador, this defeat was a real shock. The country sank into despair. The next day, the newspapers were no longer talking about football. They were talking about national shame. It was then an ordinary football match began to turn into a real international conflict. It's only been a few days, but the tension became even stronger. Now it was El Salvador's turn to host the match. Now the guests from Honduras were in a foreign city, and very quickly they realized that there would be no easy trip. All night, there was noise outside the hotel, sirens, drums. No one was going to let the opponent rest. The players looked exhausted in the morning, but no one was going to cancel the match. When the starting whistle blew, it wasn't just two teams that took the field. It seemed like two armies were meeting. Every collision caused a real explosion in the stands. People were shouting as if the fate of the country was being decided. This time El Salvador won. Now the total score was equal, and one more match had to decide everything. But after the game, the situation got worse. The newspapers on both sides blamed each other. Mass rallies began to take place on the streets. People demanded that the neighboring country respond. Now it's clear. The next match will be much more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. A few days later, the two teams met again, but now they were waiting for a decisive match. The winner would go on. This time, the match was held in neutral territory, but the hatred has not disappeared. Even before the game started, the fans were insulting each other. Each stand was trying to outshout the other. The players were also feeling the pressure. They understood that they couldn't lose today. The match had begun. From the very first seconds, no one spared the opponent. Every ball had to be literally wrestled away. The hard collisions became more frequent. Every foul caused a real explosion of emotions in the stadium. But the game continued, and soon came a moment that changed everything. For it seemed that any moment now and the fight would break out right on the football field. The ball was in the goal. The stands exploded. Some were screaming with happiness. Others were screaming with rage. The final whistle brought no relief. It was the beginning of a whole new story. The winner was El Salvador, but no one was celebrating just a football victory anymore. Because outside the stadium, something much more dangerous was beginning. There were clashes on the streets, but the worst was happening far from the football field. Thousands of people were caught between the two sides. They were abandoning their homes. The newspapers blamed the neighbors. The radio repeated angry statements. And then what many feared happened. El Salvador broke off diplomatic relations with Honduras. Now only the border remained between the two countries, and with each passing hour it became more dangerous. Military equipment was moving towards the border, but many still hoped that the war could be stopped. But on July 14, 1969, the last hope disappeared. El Salvador launched a military operation against Honduras. Just a few weeks ago, people were arguing about football. Now two armies were moving towards each other, and the world will soon call this conflict the football war. But the truth was much more complicated, and the worst was just beginning. On the evening of July 14th, the sky over Honduras changed. Planes appeared in the distance. The war has begun. Salvadoran planes were attacking military targets, and ground troops were starting to cross the border. It was all happening incredibly fast. In the first hours, the offensive moved quickly. Some border areas were under Salvadoran control, but Honduras wasn't just going to retreat. Its army began to resist. Airplanes from both countries took to the air, and air clashes began over Central America. Meanwhile, ordinary people were trying to understand only one thing. How did a football rivalry turn into a real war? But football was just a spark. The real fuel for the conflict had been building for years: earth, migration, politics. Now other countries were trying to stop the war. International mediators demanded an immediate ceasefire. The pressure was getting stronger, and after just a few days, the weapons finally started to fall silent. The war lasted about 100 hours, only 4 days, but its consequences will remain for decades. When it was over, it became clear. 4 days of war had changed the lives of thousands of people. Thousands of families lost their homes. Many could not return to their old lives. But the main question arises: did all this really happen because of football? No. The football match didn't create this conflict. It only showed the world how close the war was. Problems have been building up for years: land disputes, migration, poverty, and political enmity. But it was football that became the spark that the rest of the world noticed. So decades later, we still call it the football war. Although the real story was much more complicated. Matches are over, stadiums are empty, fans are going home. But the hatred may stay much longer. Sometimes a single match is all it takes, a single event, a single spark, to change everything. Football didn't start this war, but it showed. What happens when entire countries live on the brink of explosion for too long?